The first thing I noticed about her wasn't her beauty, it was the way she kept checking the door, like her heart was tied to it. Like every second that passed was quietly breaking something inside her. Asterisk, it was a rainy Friday night in a dimly lit bar tucked away on a quiet street in Portland, Oregon. The kind of place where people came to forget, not to be remembered. The soft hum of old jazz music filled the air, blending with the low murmur of strangers sharing drinks and stories that would never leave those walls. I wasn't supposed to be there that night. I had just ended a long, exhausting week, and all I wanted was silence. But life has a strange way of placing you exactly where you're meant to be. Asterisk. And that's where I saw her. Asterisk, she sat alone at the far end of the bar, her fingers wrapped tightly around a glass she hadn't touched. Her name, I would later learn, was Hannah. She had this quiet, fragile presence, like someone who had learned to make herself small just to avoid being hurt. Her brown hair fell gently over her shoulders, slightly damp from the rain, and her eyes. They held a kind of sadness that didn't belong to someone her age. Asterisk, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in moments that can change someone's life forever. Take a second right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Because stories like this remind us how powerful even the smallest act of care can be. Asterisk, I don't know what made me walk over to her. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was something deeper. But as I approached, I noticed she stiffened slightly, as if she wasn't used to people coming close. Asterisk, I sat down a few stools away at first, not wanting to make her uncomfortable. Minutes passed. She kept glancing at the door, each time it opened. Her eyes lit up for just a moment, only to dim again when it wasn't who she was waiting for. Asterisk, eventually. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Asterisk, I shifted closer and gently asked if she was waiting for someone. Asterisk, sigh, she hesitated before answering. Not because she didn't want to speak, but because it felt like speaking would make it real. She nodded, and then, slowly, like someone pulling thorns from their own heart, she began to tell her story. His name was Lucas. They had met 2 years ago, she said, in a small bookstore in Seattle. He had reached for the same novel she was holding, and somehow that small, insignificant moment turned into something beautiful. They talked for hours that day. Then days turned into weeks, weeks into months. He wasn't just her boyfriend, he was her safe place. But life doesn't always protect the things we love. Lucas had dreams. Big ones. He wanted to build something of his own, something that would give them a better future. And one day, he got an opportunity, a job in another state, something too good to pass up. He promised her it was temporary, just a few months. He said he'd come back. He made her a promise. And tonight was the night he was supposed to return. Asterisk, that's why she was there. That's why she kept looking at the door. Hours had passed. No messages, no calls, just silence. As she spoke, her voice didn't break. It didn't need to. The pain was already there, sitting heavy in every word she said. It was the kind of pain that had settled in long before that night, the kind that grows quietly when hope starts to fade. I didn't know what to say. What do you say to someone who's watching their world fall apart in slow motion? So I stayed. Sometimes, the best thing you can offer someone isn't words. It's presence. Asterisk, we sat there together as the night stretched on. The rain outside grew heavier, tapping against the windows like a reminder that time was moving. Even if her life felt stuck in that single moment. Asterisk around midnight. The bar started to empty. The laughter faded. The music softened. And still, she waited. Asterisk at one point. Her hand trembled slightly as she checked her phone again. Nothing. That's when I saw it. The moment hope finally broke. Asterisk, it wasn't loud. There were no tears at first. Just a quiet shift in her expression, like a light slowly dimming until there was nothing left. Asterisk, he's not coming, she whispered, more to herself than to me. Asterisk, and for the first time, her voice cracked. That's when the tears came. Not dramatic, not uncontrollable. Just silent tears slipping down her cheeks as she stared at the door one last time, as if part of her still believed he might walk through it at the very last second. But he didn't. I wanted to be angry for her. I wanted to curse Lucas for making a promise he couldn't keep. But looking at her, I realized something deeper. This wasn't just about him not showing up. It was about everything she had built around that promise. Every hope, every plan, every dream she had quietly held on to. Asterisk, and now all of it was gone. Asterisk, I handed her a napkin, unsure of what else I could offer. She took it with a small, broken smile. I feel stupid, she said softly. Asterisk, and that. That hurt more than anything else she had said, because she wasn't stupid. She was someone who believed. Asterisk, someone who loved deeply. Someone who trusted. And in a world where people leave without warning, that kind of heart is rare. Asterisk, I told her. That asterisk, not in a dramatic way, not like a speech, just simple, honest words. Asterisk, she listened. Really listened at asterisk, and for the first time that night, something in her expression changed. Not completely. The pain was still there, but it wasn't alone anymore. The bartender announced last call. She looked around, as if realizing for the first time how much time had passed. I don't know what to do now, she admitted. And I understood. Asterisk, because sometimes when something ends, it doesn't feel like a clean break. It feels like standing in the middle of nowhere, not knowing which direction to go. So I did something simple. I asked her if she wanted to go for a walk. Asterisk, she hesitated at first, but then she nodded. Asterisk, we stepped out into the rain. The city lights reflected off the wet streets, creating a soft, almost dreamlike glow. The cold air hit us, but it felt refreshing, like a reset. We walked without a destination, just as strangers, sharing the quiet aftermath of a broken promise. Asterisk, she talked more as we walked, not just about Lucas, but about herself, about how she had always been the quiet one, the one who stayed in the background, the one who didn't ask for much, and maybe that's why losing him felt so overwhelming, because he had been the one thing she allowed herself to want fully. Asterisk, at some point, the rain started to slow. Asterisk, and something else happened too. She started to smile. Not big, not loud. Just small. Genuine moments where the weight on her shoulders seemed a little lighter. Asterisk, we ended up sitting on a bench overlooking the river. The city stretched out in front of us, alive and moving, as if reminding us that life doesn't stop. For heartbreak, asterisk, I think. I'll be okay, she said quietly. Asterisk, and this time, I believed her, because there was something different in her voice. Not certainty. Not yet, but strength. The kind that comes from surviving something you thought would break you. Asterisk, before we parted ways, she looked at me with a kind of gratitude that didn't need words. Asterisk, you didn't have to stay, she said. I shrugged lightly. Maybe I did. Asterisk, because the truth is, we never really know why we meet certain people at certain times. Asterisk, but sometimes we're exactly what the other person needs. Asterisk, and maybe, just maybe, they're what we need too. Asterisk, if this story touched your heart even a little, take a moment to like, comment, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. You never know who's waiting for a reminder that they're not alone. Asterisk, and before we reach the end, I have a small request. Asterisk, comment the word hope, if you believe that even the most painful endings can lead to something beautiful. Asterisk, a few weeks later, I went back to that same bar, not because I expected to see her again, but because something about that night stayed with me. Asterisk, and then I saw her, Hannah. She was sitting at the same spot. Asterisk, but this time she wasn't looking at the door. Asterisk, she was reading a book. A soft smile on her face, completely at peace. Asterisk, when she looked up and saw me, her smile grew. And in that moment, I realized something important. Lucas never came back, but she did. Stronger, braver, and finally, choosing herself. Asterisk, and maybe that's the kind of ending that matters most.